All right, the first seventh chord we're going to look at is the A7. A7 is an open chord with notes E and C sharp fretted, and you can use either your index finger and your middle finger, or you can use your middle finger and your ring finger. Now, I'll play them both ways depending on which chord I am coming from or going to. And I'll show you an example of both of those. I prefer generally though how to play it with my middle finger up here on the fourth string and my ring finger down here on the second string. Regardless of how you play this, you notice you're going to have an open third string, that G string. So we want nice tall fingers when we play the A7 and the E7 for that matter, and the D7 for that matter, and really all chords for that matter. But in particular, since we have an open string in here, we want tall fingers because we don't want our ring finger coming up and touching and muting that open third string, or relaxing the middle finger and doing the same thing by touching it below. So a nice tall. Another way to think of it is A7 is, here's A major without the middle finger. Okay, so which way do I play them? Depending on the chord. Let's say I'm up here and I'm playing an E major. You'll play E, A, and D, and you'll play E7, A7, and D7, which we'll talk about here in a second. And the seventh chords and the major chords together. So if I'm up here playing E major, for example, and I'm going to move to an A7, you notice all I have to do is I have to move my middle finger down one string and then my ring finger down two strings. Or if I'm playing E minor, same thing. And if you want to play it with two fingers, or the index finger and the middle finger in this situation, if you're playing an E major, look what you have to do. You've got to come off and then you kind of have to reposition, come down here to play that A7. So I think it's just a lot, economy of movement kind of thing. So from E, just drop down. Okay, now moving between the D major and the A7, I will use my index and my middle finger because they're already in position. So here's D major. All I have to do is come up one string with both of those. So I move here. It's a very short movement. I mean, I could play them with my middle two fingers, and sometimes I will because it's just so ingrained. It's not that much more of a stretch for me, but if I'm thinking about it consciously, I will play it like this. But generally, I'll play it with my middle and my ring fingers. But like everything else, it's whatever works for you. Now, we talked about those release chords for the A7. The release chord from an A7 is a D major. Okay, let's move on. Okay, next is E7. All right, so here's E7. The way most people play it, the way I play it, you have your middle finger up here on note B, fifth string of the second fret, and then your index finger down here on the third string of the first fret, which we know is note G sharp. Okay? That's the way you play the E7. Now, if you notice, here's E major, and here's E7. So it's just E major without the ring finger. easy peasy. And as I noted in the text of this lesson here, sometimes you'll see people adding their pinky down here to the note D on the second string of the third fret. That's just another way to play it, to bring in a little more treble. And sometimes they'll play it without the ring finger. So E7 or E7. Sometimes it's E minor 7, I think. So that's E7. All right. The last one is D7. So here's D. Remember our good old our claw, we form up D. Now, if you look at the diagram for D, D7 is kind of the chord diagram from D, just kind of on its side, right? Well, problem is our hand doesn't work that way. I mean, it won't happen. So what we have to do is we have to take our index finger and we have to nail that C first, okay? And then we straddle the B string with our middle and our ring finger. Okay. Now the trick in playing the D7 is you gotta keep that second string from touching above and below your middle finger or your ring finger. Okay. That B string, the fretted B string now, has to ring true. Okay, so that's really all there is to say. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is we went over kind of how we would move from A7 to D and back, right? And from E to E7 and back. What I didn't mention, and there's a good reason for this, is what about going from A7 to A minor? I guess I should play the A minor if I'm going to talk about it. A7 to A minor. And what about going from E7 to E minor? Well, if you remember that how, with the circle of fifths, remember how those chords are set up. The seventh chords take on the characteristics of the major. So if you look at where A and A7 are in relationship to the A minor, and then the E, and by extension the E7 to the E minor, they're outside the chord families. So you're just not going to, there are no absolutes, but very rarely will you play an A7th because it takes on the characteristics of an A major. You won't be moving from an A7 to an A minor, and conversely from an E7 to an E minor. They're two totally dissimilar. So we're not gonna incorporate those in our chord changing practices, because remember the idiom there: practice what you're going to play. So on that note, let's do some practice with these chord progressions.